Hi everybody, and welcome to my tour on the architecture of Covent Garden. I'm Chris, and I'm an architect, and I'm going to show you around the area. Archaeological finds show that the first gang of people to settle here were Anglo-Saxon, and they called the area Ludenvik. In the 9th century, however, the sight of the Vikings coming down the Thames, raping and pillaging, must have been horrifying, and the Anglo-Saxons abandoned the area, moving back into the original Roman walled city to the east, where they could protect themselves. This area then reverted to agricultural land, when in the 1100s it became a walled garden, providing food for the convent and monks of Westminster Abbey, hence the name Convent Garden and eventually Covent Garden. During the Reformation and Henry VIII's destruction of the monasteries, the area was acquired by the first Earl of Bedford. And this ultimately led to the creation of the first public square in the country, when a later version of the Earl of Bedford commissioned one of our architectural heroes, Inigo Jones, to design a new piazza. Having done the grand tour, Jones was inspired by classical Renaissance architecture, and in particular the work of Andrea Palladio. In this image, we can see a comparison between the colonnaded house design of Jones alongside that of Palladio, with classical proportions, pilasters, a rusticated arcaded ground floor and larger windows on the first floor, known as the piano nobile. Although none of the original houses designed by Jones remain, this section behind me is the most faithful replica to his work. So as you pass through the arcade into the Apple Mac store to purchase the latest iPhone, please spare a thought for Inigo Jones. The original plan for the square is that it would be occupied by well-to-do people. However, when Charles I gave permission for there to be a fruit and veg market in the square, the area, in terms of poshness, went downhill. In terms of vibrancy, however, it thrived, becoming a combination of theatre land and red light district. In fact, if you were looking for a prostitute, help was at hand through a fella by the name of Jack Harris, who wrote Harris's List of Covent Garden Ladies, which provided descriptions of each lady and where to find them. Back in the day, it was referred to as the essential guide and accessory for any serious gentleman of pleasure. In the 17th century, the famous diarist and all-round cool dude, Samuel Pepys, wrote about watching a Punch and Judy show here. Hence the name, the Punch and Judy, of the pub just over behind me. Eventually, in 1830, the architect, Charles Fowler, designed the current building to cover the market. The architecture is a combination of neoclassical architecture on the one hand and industrial on the other, with wrought iron arches spanning the space and the glazed roof to allow lots of daylight to enter into the space. Due to problems with traffic congestion, Covent Garden was eventually relocated to New Covent Garden at 9 Elms. Today, though, Covent Garden thrives as a shopping centre and tourist attraction, complete with street performers that carry on the Punch and Judy tradition. Inigo Jones also designed St Paul's Church, and it's one of my favourites. The story goes that the Earl of Bedford instructed Jones to keep the design modest, so that it was not much better than a barn, to which Jones replied, "Well, you should have the handsomest barn in England." Again, Jones designed the church in the classical Renaissance style, with its pediment sitting on top of 2 square and 2 round Tuscan-ordered columns. The curious thing about the church is that the entrance was originally going to be through the main portico, which faces the piazza. But as this facade also faces east, the Bishop of London insisted that the altar be positioned there instead, and the entrance was moved round the back of the church. In fact, you can clearly see Jones's original intended entrance blocked up. We're now in the church's graveyard, where the first Great Plague victim was buried in 1665. And you can also see, if you look down, that the graveyard has been remodelled using occupants' gravestones as paving slabs. We've come round the back of the church to this pretty secret garden, where I'm sure if you propose marriage to someone, they'll say yes, although I don't know, I've never tried it. Any guesses as to what this blue TARDIS-like box is for? Actually, it's a watchman's hut, where someone would keep watch on all the gravestones to make sure that none of the graves were dug up and the bodies were sold for medical experiment. Inside the church, we can see the clear features of Jones's interior. Purpose-built for the Protestant faith, with its simple layout so that the entire congregation has visual sight of the preacher, and clear glass windows to allow as much daylight in as possible, features that would influence the church designs of Christopher Wren. The church is also known as the Actors' Church, with memorials to Charlie Chaplin, Noel Coward and Gracie Fields. On the opposite side of Covent Garden's piazza, you can find the London Transport Museum. Housed within what was originally a flower market, the museum tells the story of London's transport from horse-drawn vehicles to trolley buses to the tube. Here's a bit of trivia for you. There's only one stop on the whole of the underground system not to share a letter with the word mackerel. I'll leave you with that one to work out in your own time. We're now standing in front of the Royal Opera House. Constructed in the 19th century in a period known as the Battle of the Styles between Gothic Revival architecture and neoclassical architecture, the building falls firmly within the latter of these two camps, with its triangular pediment on top of Corinthian columns on top of a rusticated ground floor. What I really like is the contrast between the heavy stonework of the main Opera House building and the glazed floral hall alongside it. Inspired by the wrought iron prefabricated architecture of the Crystal Palace, famously built for the Great Exhibition of 1851, the floral hall includes the main public space, including a restaurant and champagne bar. The Opera House is steeped in history. Its horseshoe-shaped auditorium and stage have been the site of many famous shows, including operas by George Frederick Handel and performances by the great clown Joseph Grimaldi. I recently watched a ballet production of Don Quixote with an ex-Spanish girlfriend, which I have to say was rather challenging until we knocked back a couple of glasses of wine during the intermission and things started to make more sense. Another cool feature from an architectural perspective is the Bridge of Aspiration. Designed by Wilkinson Eyre Architects, this funky bridge connects the Royal Opera House with the Royal Ballet School. Twisting over the top of Floral Street, the idea is that the bridge makes reference to the fluidity and grace of dance. We've come up to Covent Garden's rooftop bar, with fantastic views of London, including the London Eye, St Martin's in the Fields Church and Nelson's Column. However, it all feels a bit upmarket, almost like we shouldn't be here. So we're going to head to another drinking establishment where we'll feel more at home. Tucked away at the top of Rose Street, we come across one of my favourite pubs, the Lammon Flag. It's one of the oldest pubs in London, and it was frequented by Charles Dickens. And in keeping with the area's bawdy, den of iniquity type reputation, the pub once hosted bare knuckle fights, leading to it being nicknamed the Bucket of Blood. It also seems like a good place to end the tour. But before we go inside and sink a few pints of ale, just to say, if you have enjoyed the tour, please do leave a like, or better still, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next tour.